Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
Jason promised Britt he wouldn't leave her. Willow and Curtis each entered developments in the cases against them regarding Drew's firing, and Nina gave Jacinda a stern warning after chancing her and Michael making out in her office. Britt was irked to find Jason in her room at Bobby's, formerly Kelly's restaurant, after she had discovered him poking. Jason said if he wanted to make off with her meds, he'd have done so formally. Jason had questions. Britt said she was fine. Jason said he did exploration and was unsure how Britt's symptoms were all being blocked. Britt fooled Jason would learn what he demanded to on Wiki Medicines. Jason said commodity was adding up. Jason told Britt he believed that she was still doing effects to make sure she'd continue to get her meds. He added that he wanted to work together with her. Jason said that he wanted to give some of her meds to an outfit that could help someone who's a good friend of his who used to be in intelligence. Jason wanted to help Britt be free from whoever was holding the meds over her head. Britt fooled that Jason wanted to cure Huntington's. Jason said he'd always accepted Britt for who she was. And who's that? Britt asked. Jason said that she was a croaker who helped people, who watched about her mama, Nathan, and Brad. Jason said he wouldn't leave Britt when she had the lemon strapped to her ankle. He asked her to let him help her. Britt seized Jason and kissed passionately. Not a chance, she said. Isaiah checked on Portia, who said she was getting out of the sanitarium soon. She just demanded rest. Isaiah asked how she'd feel about spending some time with him. Portia confessed that Isaiah's cabin was further inviting than her place at the Metro Court. Trina intruded and asked her mama how she was doing. Isaiah left. Trina asked when her mama was going to tell her about the baby she was carrying. Trina said she learned about the baby after hearing Aunt Stella and Curtis talking at Thanksgiving. Portia said the thing was to keep it from everyone until after the first trimester. She added that he'd figured it out and couldn't lie to him. Trina wanted to know if the divorce was being called off. Portia said nothing had changed. Trina told Portia that she went to see her pater at the police station. She brought up Jordan's name and also realized that her mama's health could be affected by the subject of Jordan. Portia prompted Trina to concentrate on Academy and Kai. Trina said that the baby will be lucky to have Portia and Curtis as parents. Christina came home and asked Alexis if Willow was ready for her trial. Alexis said there's a new suspect that might not forebode well for them. Alexis theorized that Drew would uphold the restraining order with Scout if Alexis did not save Willow more directly. Christina said she was upset about Scout, but also Michael. Alexis wondered what would be if Willow got guardianship. Drew visited Curtis in captivity. The Solon said that he didn't want Curtis to go down for the crime indeed, though he knew he'd done it. Curtis said he didn't shoot Drew, and he didn't watch if he believed him or not. Curtis did point out that if he goes down, also Drew will, too. Curtis said that he'd take the stage and swear at trial that Drew abused his power and went after Portia and Aunt Stella. Drew misdoubted he'd do that. Curtis held establishment. Drew said that if Curtis took the stage, also he'd suddenly flash back who shot him. Dante appeared and told Curtis that he'd good news for him, and he told Drew that he'd news that was too good for him. Nina was spooked that Michael and Jacinda, her adjunct, were having coitus her office. A shirtless Michael suggested she calm down. Dressed, Michael invited Nina back into her own office. Michael said that they're all grown-ups, and Nina walked in on a private moment. Here he focused out that Nina had had relations with Drew in his office. Nina wanted her office professionally sanitized. For a woman who hired someone to medicine a Solon, you're acting awfully superior. Jalinda refocused out. Nina said she was acting, she was Jalinda's superior. Michael claimed HR formerly knew about him and Jacinda. Nina wanted to know if the dress she saw on her bottom was a specific developer. Nina said that HR might be okay with Michael and Jacinda's affair, but the family court wouldn't be. Nina said that Michael and his coitus worker could denominate every flat service in Port Charles after he loses guardianship of Wiley and Amelia. Michael advised Nina not to talk to HR about Jacinda and him. Nina agreed, but she questioned that Michael had to promise not to have coitus in her office. We'll try to restrain ourselves, Michael said. Jacinda was more married and said it wouldn't be again. She excused herself to go back to her office, but Nina commanded her to stop. Nina said that all the dresses in her office demanded to be fumed, the developer dress on the bottom demanded to be dry-gutted, and everything demanded to be logged and mugged. Jacinda agreed. Nina agreed to look the other way. Jacinda thanked Nina. Nina allowed. For a moment, and also refocused out to Jacinda that if she didn't want to return to her former line of work that she demanded to side with her. Willow went to see Chase. She participated with him that the police have another suspect. Willow told Chase that the police suspect Curtis, so she can see her kitties now. Chase refocused out that the judge handed down her decision before Drew was shot. Brooklyn said Chase could stop putting his career on the line for Willow now that the police have another suspect. She added it was good that she got there when she did. Brooklyn read Willow, the Hoot Act. Willow apologized. Brooklyn said she understood Willow's position, but she stands by what she said. Willow started to leave and asked if they could keep quiet about her indeed coming there. Chase agreed. Willow thanked them and left. Brooklyn asked Chase what he was allowing. Brooklyn prompted Chase to let this all play out. Chase said it would have been awful if Michael had walked in and seen Willow. Yeah, it would, Michael said as he stood in the doorway. Michael was glad to hear that Brooklyn and Chase had gotten rid of Willow before she saw the kitties, but that he demanded them to subscribe commodity that would say she was there. Chase said that wasn't going to be. Brooklyn said they didn't want to get involved. Chase said he'd no interest in coming between a mama and her kitties, but that Michael was further than free to subpoena him. Dante asked an officer to get him Willow's evidence, to check out a distinction. Dante showed DA Turner and Nathan the recently discovered videotape of Willow driving in the rain on Drew's road. It's not clear substantiation, but it supports their case against Willow. Dante asked Turner who she wanted to go after, Willow or Curtis, now that there is new information. Turner said there was no denying the indicting substantiation against Willow. Turner said they'd be pacing with Willow's trial after all. Turner called Alexis and streamlined her on the new information about Willow and how this could lead to farther charges. Nathan wondered if it was wise to drop charges against Curtis. Turner said they could keep them in their reverse pockets for laterally, but that the case against Willow was stronger. Nathan called Nina, who was drawing her office. She was happy to hear her voice. He asked her to come to the station. Commodity had happed, and Chase allowed. Nina should hear it from him. Nina told Jacinda that she had to go out. She added that whoever gets ahead at Crimson depends on her. Nina refocused out that Michael would drop her, and that she didn't want to be 40 times old, turning tricks. She advised Jacinda that she should be careful where she made her messes, and she'd no way know when she might need a friend. Willow showed up at Alexis's, wanting to know if the charges had been dropped. Alexis asked Willow why she'd been lying each on. Drew arrived and wanted to know about the new substantiation. Willow showed Drew the videotape of her driving in the rain on a road near Drew's house that Alexis had given her. Willow swore to Drew that she didn't go outside. Drew said he believed her. They hugged. Yeah, that's lovely, Alexis said with a bit of a front. Now, I just have to move a jury of that. Drew said he was confident that she'd find a way. Alexis said Willow's falsehoods had made her job harder. An anxious Curtis asked Isaiah at General Hospital where Portia was. He refocused out that Portia couldn't have any stress right now. Curtis entered Portia's room. Trina hugged her father, happy to have seen him. Curtis asked if the baby was okay. Curtis said that everything would be fine. Nothing additional signified than they were there with Trina, and a healthy baby was on the way. Portia descried Isaiah in her doorway, seesawing yes, as Curtis invited Portia to come home with him. Trina offered to help. Portia agreed. Curtis and Trina were thrilled. Nathan told Nina that the charges against Curtis were being dropped and the case against Nina was moving forward, as there was footage of Willow being near Drew's house. Turner gave Dante the processes he demanded to search for further business-light substantiation against Willow. She wanted to know if he'd be okay attesting against his former family-in-law. The day in Port Charles unfolded like a baptism without mercy, not one of gentle water and absolution, but a brutal cleansing of secrets, loyalties, and lies, as vows were made under pressure, Encouragement was offered through fear, and threats were sharpened into weapons, beginning when Britt Westbourne returned to her room above Bobby's, still echoing with the ghosts of Kelly's, only to find Jason Morgan already inside, uninvited and unapologetic, standing among her things like a sentry who refused to abandon his post, Britt's irritation flaring instantly as she accused him of snooping and crossing boundaries. Yet Jason calmly countered that if he had wanted to steal her medication, he would have done it already, his blunt honesty cutting through her defenses as he admitted he had questions he could no longer ignore. Britt brushed him off, insisting she was fine, that he was imagining problems that didn't exist, mocking his concern with sarcasm and reminding him that wiki drugs wouldn't give him the answers he wanted. But Jason remained unmoved, explaining that he'd done real research and nothing about Britt's symptoms, or the way they seemed to be mysteriously managed, made sense, telling her that something wasn't adding up and that he believed she was still being forced to jump through invisible hoops just to keep access to the medication she needed to survive, a truth Britt didn't deny so much as dodge. Jason pressed further, urging her to stop fighting alone, proposing that they work together, revealing his plan to quietly divert some of her medication to a trusted ally from his intelligence days, someone capable of analyzing what was really happening and breaking the hold of whoever was using Britt's condition as leverage, prompting Britt to scoff that Jason had suddenly decided he could cure Huntington's, only for him to answer with quiet conviction that he had never tried to change her or fix her, that he accepted her exactly as she was, forcing Britt to ask who he thought that even was, and Jason's answer, steady, sincere, hit harder than any accusation, as he described her as a doctor who saved lives, a woman who loved her mother fiercely, who carried grief for Nathan, loyalty for Brad, and compassion she pretended not to have. When Jason reminded her that he hadn't walked away even when she'd been strapped to a bomb, promising he would not leave now, and asking her to trust him just this once, the moment broke open something raw and dangerous between them, Britt grabbing him and kissing him with desperate intensity before pulling away and declaring, not a chance, her refusal ringing hollow with fear rather than rejection. Across town, Portia Robinson prepared for her own fragile rebirth as Isaiah checked on her recovery, gently encouraging rest and even floating the idea of retreating to his cabin once she was discharged, a suggestion Portia admitted felt safer and warmer than returning to the metro court. Though the moment shattered when Trina interrupted, her concern quickly turning into confrontation as she asked when her mother planned to tell her about the baby she was carrying, revealing she'd learned the truth by overhearing Stella and Curtis at Thanksgiving, forcing Portia to admit she'd hoped to keep the pregnancy secret until after the first trimester, but that Curtis had already figured it out, leading Trina to ask whether that meant her parents' divorce might be undone, only to be told that nothing had changed, though Trina still offered encouragement, insisting the baby would be lucky to have Portia and Curtis as parents. The legal storm intensified when Christina pressed Alexis about Willow's readiness for trial, only to learn that a new suspect had emerged, news that complicated everything and raised fears about custody, restraining orders, and whether Drew might retaliate by using Scout as leverage if Willow wasn't saved outright, while Alexis openly worried about the chaos that would follow if Willow regained custody. Behind bars, Drew Kane paid Curtis a charged visit, claiming he didn't want Curtis to take the fall even while implying he believed Curtis was guilty, a claim Curtis flatly denied, stating he didn't care what Drew believed and warning that if he went down, Drew would be dragged with him, threatening to take the stand and testify about Drew's abuse of power against Portia and Stella, a threat Drew dismissed until Dante arrived with news that flipped the balance. Good news for Curtis, devastating news for Drew. The day's most explosive confrontation detonated at Crimson when Nina Reeves walked into her office and caught Michael Corinthos and her assistant Jacinda in a compromising embrace, shock turning instantly into fury as a shirtless Michael coolly told Nina to calm down, insisting they were consenting adults and even daring to remind her of her own history with Drew in that very office, prompting Nina to demand professional sanitation and bristle when Jacinda threw Nina's own past sins back at her, only for Nina's anger to harden into authority as she reminded Jacinda exactly who her superior was, Michael smugly claimed HR already knew about the affair, but Nina's warning cut far deeper than corporate policy, as she pointed out that while HR might shrug, family court would not, promising that Michael's reckless behavior with his paid alibi could cost him custody of Wiley and Amelia, threatening that he and his sex worker could christen every flat surface in Port Charles after he lost everything that mattered, a threat that forced Michael into a fragile truce as Nina agreed not to go to HR on one condition: no more sex in her office, while Jacinda pledged compliance and then froze when Nina ordered her to stay, issuing a chilling reminder that if Jacinda wanted to escape her former life, she needed to choose her allies carefully, because Michael would discard her the moment she became inconvenient. And friends were survival in this town. Meanwhile, Willow learned from Chase that police now suspected Curtis, temporarily opening the door for her to see her children. Though Chase reminded her the ruling predated the shooting, tension escalating when Brooke Lynn confronted Willow for jeopardizing everything, only for Michael to appear in the doorway moments later, demanding documentation of Willow's presence and being met with firm refusal, a standoff underscoring just how poisoned trust had become. At the PCPD, Dante presented newly discovered footage of Willow driving near Drew's house in the rain, circumstantial but damaging enough for ADA Turner to declare the case against Willow stronger than ever, choosing to proceed with her trial while quietly shelving Curtis' charges for possible future use. A decision relayed grimly to Alexis as Willow clung to Drew's reassurance, and Alexis reminded them both that convincing a jury would be far harder than convincing each other. Amid the chaos, a quieter but powerful moment unfolded at General Hospital when Curtis reunited with Portia and Trina, promising that nothing mattered more than their family and the baby's health, a moment of genuine encouragement shadowed by looming consequences as Nathan later informed Nina that Curtis' charges were being dropped while the case against Willow moved forward, setting the stage for a merciless reckoning. By nightfall, Port Charles stood baptized not in forgiveness, but in consequence. Jason bound by a promise he refused to break, Britt trapped between trust and terror, Willow facing a trial fueled by suspicion, Curtis temporarily spared but still exposed, and Nina having made it clear that mercy in this town always comes with conditions, because in Port Charles, encouragement is a test, love is leverage, and every vow, spoken or broken, demands its price. The hallowed halls of General Hospital, a place typically echoing with the beeps of heart monitors and the soft murmurs of healing, were instead vibrating with a far more primal and destructive energy. In one wing, a gathering of hope and light was taking place, the baptism of baby Liam. In another, a conflagration of betrayal and desire was burning a marriage to ashes. The day would be remembered not for its blessings, but for the explosive collision of sacred vows and profane secrets, leaving a trail of shattered trust and furious promises of vengeance in its wake. Waters of grace and whispers of doom. The chapel was a sanctuary of soft light and softer voices. Diane Miller, in a rare moment of uncynical sincerity, and Curtis Ashford, his heart still tender from his own trials, stood as godparents. Before them, Brooke Lynn Quartermain and Harrison Chase held their son, Liam, their faces illuminated by a profound, hard-won joy. The chaos of their journey, the deception, the heartache, the relentless threats from Tracy Quartermain seemed to melt away in the holy quiet of the moment. The priest's words, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit," fell like a balm. Water, the symbol of cleansing and new beginning, touched the baby's forehead. Around them, their chosen family offered silent support. Lois Cerullo, Brooke Lynn's mother, wept unabashedly, her vibrant energy softened by gratitude. Ned Quartermain, reconciled with his daughter, stood straighter, the weight of family strife momentarily lifted. The air was thick with encouraging words. Diane later quipped that she promised to teach Liam contract law and how to plead the fifth, but her eyes held a genuine warmth. Curtis spoke of strength and integrity, a legacy he vowed to help nurture. For Chase and Brooke Lynn, these affirmations were a fortress against past storms. They were a declaration that their family, however unconventional its foundation, was real, blessed, and resilient. Yet, even in this cocoon of grace, the outside world pressed in. Tracy Quartermain, the architect of so much of their previous misery, was conspicuously absent, her disapproval a lingering chill. And whispers, carried on the nervous glances of a few attendees, hinted at other tensions simmering in the hospital. The peace felt precious and fragile, a perfect bubble about to be popped by a needle of brutal reality. The tinderbox, Michael's ascension and Nina's mission. Across the hospital, in the sleek, sterile environment of the administrative suite, a different ceremony had just concluded. Michael Corinthos, having successfully navigated the machinations of his grandmother Tracy and proven his strategic acumen, was formally installed as the new chief operating officer of Aurora Media, with control over the Port Charles press. The boardroom applause was polite, the handshakes firm. But Michael's victory was underscored by a quiet, relentless anger. His primary motivation was no longer business expansion, but a very personal crusade: the systematic destruction of Nina Reeves. Nina, his mother Carly's nemesis and the woman who had concealed the truth that his son, Wiley, was actually Sonny Corinthos' child, was his white whale. He saw his new position not as a seat of power, but as a weapon. Every decision, every headline in the press, would be filtered through the lens of her ruin. His fiancée, Willow Tate, though supportive, watched this cold fury with a growing unease, seeing the man she loved consumed by a darkness that threatened to eclipse their future happiness. Unaware that the spear pointed at her heart had just been sharpened, Nina moved through the hospital with a singular, desperate focus of her own. Her marriage to Sonny Corinthos, the mob kingpin with a reformed facade, was crumbling under the weight of his lingering connection to Carly. Paranoia and insecurity gnawed at her. Convinced that Sonny was once again betraying her trust, perhaps even rekindling his old flame, Nina had become a detective in her own tragic life. She was hunting for proof, any proof, of his infidelity. Her search that day, fueled by a volatile mix of heartbreak and rage, was about to lead her to a revelation far more shocking than she could have imagined. The unholy communion, passion in the president's office. In the plush, secluded office of the chief of staff, Dr. Michael Corinthos and his head of nursing, Jacinda Peralta, were engaged in a communion of an entirely different nature. The professional boundaries between them, long strained by mutual attraction and shared ambition, had finally vaporized. What began as a tense discussion about hospital policy, or perhaps a mutual lament over the frustrations in their personal lives, had escalated with electric speed. Files were swept from the desk. The door, foolishly unlocked in their haste, was a silent accomplice. Here, in the very seat of institutional authority, they were not doctor and administrator, but two people succumbing to a reckless, hungry passion. It was a betrayal with multiple layers, of Jacinda's professional ethics, of Michael's commitment to Willow, and of the sanctity of the space itself. They were blind and deaf to anything but each other, a catastrophic mistake in a hospital where secrets had a lifespan measured in minutes. Nina's path, a frantic zigzag through corridors, was guided by misdirected suspicion but fateful accuracy. She wasn't looking for Michael or Jacinda, she was hunting for Sonny. But the universe, with a cruel sense of irony, directed her to the one door that would detonate her world, and several others. The opaque glass of the chief of staff's office may have blurred the details, but the silhouettes within were engaged in an unmistakable, intimate dance. A wave of nauseating certainty crashed over her. Sonny. Here in the hospital with who? Carly? Another woman? The betrayal she had feared was confirmed in the most graphic way. A guttural cry, torn from the depths of her soul, erupted from her lips. I knew it. She didn't knock. The doorknob turned easily under her furious hand. The door flew open, framing a scene of instant, frozen horror. But it wasn't Sonny and Carly who snapped apart, scrambling for clothing with faces etched in pure terror. It was her own son-in-law, Michael, the man hell-bent on destroying her, and his subordinate, Jacinda. Time stopped. The air was sucked from the room. Nina's rage, so vast and all-consuming a second before, twisted into something complex and horrifying. The betrayal was still there, but it was refracted, a shocking, personal affront. This was the man who judged her, who condemned her for her secrets, now exposed in his own filthy hypocrisy. The scandal of it was astronomical. The aftermath, angry threats and a web of consequences. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. It was broken by Nina's voice, now low, shaking with a new kind of fury, cold, precise, and venomous. "You," she hissed at Michael, her eyes like shards of ice. "You self-righteous monster. You sit in judgment of me? You scheme to take everything from me while you're defiling your office with a staff member? Does Willow know? Does your son know what his father does in his big, important office?" Michael, pale and scrambling for dignity, could only muster a weak, "Nina, this isn't what it." "Save it," she roared. "Every sanctimonious word you've ever said to me is now garbage. You're a fraud. A cheap, lying fraud." She turned her scorching gaze to Jacinda, who was trembling, tears of shame streaking her makeup. "And you?" "The head nurse. My God. The board will have you both for breakfast." This is where the angry threats began to fly, not as random bluster, but as strategic missiles. Michael, his own shock hardening into defensive aggression, stepped forward. "You breathe a word of this to anyone," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "and I will not just destroy your career, Nina. I will eviscerate you. The Port Charles Press will run a story every day about your lies, your manipulations, your pathetic attempts to steal a family that was never yours. I will make sure Sonny sees you for the toxic disaster you are. You will have nothing." Nina let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You think you can threaten me? You're in my crosshairs now, Michael. I have the ultimate leverage. One phone call to Willow. One anonymous tip to the hospital board about your egregious misconduct. One little whisper to your father about how his COO spends his working hours. Your precious new empire? It's built on sand, and I have the tide." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You stay out of my way. You dissolve your little vendetta against me. Or I will paint this hospital with your scandal." See how Aurora's stock likes that headline. Jacinda, sobbing, could only plead. "Please, Ms. Reeves, it was a mistake. A moment of weakness, my career." "Your career is the least of what you should be worried about." Nina spat, not with pity, but with a ruthless clarity. She was a woman who had lost everything before, and in that desperation, she found a terrifying strength. She had just been handed a nuclear option. Ripples of the quake. The fallout from that single, shattered moment was immediate and far-reaching. In the chapel, the baptismal party emerged into the hallway, buoyant with love. They walked directly into the storm. Nina stormed past them, a vortex of fury, refusing to acknowledge anyone. A moment later, a ashen-faced Michael, his suit disheveled, exited the admin wing, his eyes hollow. The stark contrast between the blessed event and this palpable corruption cast a pall over their joy. Chase, the detective, immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. The encouraging words of minutes ago now felt like a prologue to a different, darker story. In the relationships, Willow, waiting to celebrate with Michael, saw the ghost in his eyes and felt a premonitory chill. Sonny, arriving late and confused by Nina's furious, cryptic texts, would soon be caught in the crossfire of a war he didn't start. Carly, if and when she learned, would be torn between maternal protection for Michael and a savage satisfaction at his downfall. And Jacinda faced not only professional annihilation, but the unraveling of her entire life. The professional dynamite, a hospital sex scandal involving the COO and the head of nursing, is more than gossip. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen, a media firestorm, and a crisis of institutional trust. Tracy Quartermain would seize on it to reclaim her position. The board would be forced into a bloody, public investigation. Epilogue: a war declared. The baptism of baby Liam was meant to be an end to old conflicts and a beginning grounded in faith. Instead, It became the backdrop for the start of a new, more vicious war. The encouraging words, spoken in the chapel, were now drowned out by the echo of angry threats in a desecrated office. Nina, armed with a secret more powerful than any she had ever concealed, was transformed from a pursued victim into a dangerous, unpredictable adversary. Michael's throne of power had become a cage, his weapon turned against him. Their mutual destruction was now assured, locked in a suicide pact where the only question was who would pull the trigger first. In Port Charles, baptisms promise salvation, but scandals guarantee chaos. And as the office door swung shut on Michael and Jacinda Sin, it swung open on a future where everyone, Willow, Sunny, Carly, Chase, Brooklyn, and an innocent baby just christened, would be caught in the devastating blast wave. The healing mission of General Hospital had just received a critical, self-inflicted wound, the shattering. I knew it.